The grain market over the last 3 years has been unprecedentedly volatile. We saw a period leading up to 2007 where production of wheat and key grains didn't meet demand, and so by 2007 we reached a 33-year low in the world stocks, with only 60 days stocks left in the world at that point. That pushed grain prices up to very high levels, £200 a tonne for wheat at the peak. Following that, 2008 and then the 2009 harvests were the two largest harvests we've ever seen globally, and that has replenished world stocks, taking our closing stocks up to 110 days and completely changing the world market. So that has, as a result, pushed wheat prices right back down again to levels of about 80 or 90 pounds a tonne.
Yeah, I mean, one of the great things about central storage is that on commodities such as milling wheat, we can provide a blend of grain which the miller wants. What a miller wants to see is grain of consistent quality. He wants 13% protein, 250 Hagberg, 76 kilo. In a store, we can do that. On a farm, a farmer may only have 12% protein, and the miller doesn't want that. He wants consistent supply all the time. And what we would do is that we'll take in milling wheat at 12%, we'll then get milling wheat at 14%, and we can blend that to what the miller requires. And it's the same thing with malting barley.
Over the last couple of years, when we've had these horrendously wet harvests, the mobile batch dryers are what people have looked to get them out of the proverbial. It's a pretty bulletproof system because it's continually turning the grain over, recirculating it. It keeps the grain loose and open so that the airflow can get through it and dry it, and it keeps it all moving. Whereas a lot of the big fixed continuous flow dryers have been struggling with movement of grain through the machine, getting caught up or getting difficulties blocking up in certain places. So that's one of the major drivers.
Well, central storage certainly is increasing in popularity. I think farmers are realising that their own storage facilities on site, are on their own farms rather, are becoming more and more dilapidated.
Current farm stores are simply not up to the job. Many of them were put up in the 1960s and 1970s, and they're just not capable of handling the grain that's being harvested now. In those days, combines were probably combining at between 5 and 10 tonnes an hour. Now you've got combines that are capable of combining at 50 tonnes an hour, and the farm stores currently cannot cope with either that volume of grain coming in at harvest or the condition of the grain, because these days when a farmer starts combining, he wants to go, and if the grain is 17-18%, he still wants to cut it. He's got to get it in, and the farm stores simply can't dry the grain adequately or condition it.
For the next few years, I think we're going to see quite a lot of volatility, and there's a very tight supply and demand balance. We're seeing increasing demand and supply just about keeping up with that. We've got a big stock at the moment, and while that sits there, the world prices will be low, but it will only take one bad harvest to change that again.
The key thing really is to look at the flow of the grain around the farm, where you're storing wet grain, where you're storing dry grain, and think about it enough so you minimise the downtime. The big problem is where you're double handling grain, where you're unloading it into, say, a trailer just to move it 20 or 30 yards across the yard. We found people putting a lot of thought into some quite clever systems of late, reducing the amount of labour and reducing the amount of double handling, which effectively gives you more efficient drying at a lower cost.
We realised that there's probably about 20 stores, 20 farmer-owned stores in the country, and we were all doing different things. We all had different objectives. What we're doing now in Network Grain is that we're bringing all the stores together and working with one another, firstly on simple things like repairs and renewals. You know, we can talk to another. Which engineers are you using? Which conveyors are you looking at?
Realistically, if you're wanting to get it down to under 15, you probably find that the wetter bit comes off more easily than the drier bit. So the last 2 or 3% to get it under 15 is the most difficult. But I'd say on for a 29-ton batch, you're going to take sort of 4 hours-ish if it's 25%. We tend to work them on taking 5% out and aim for as close as we can do a batch in 2 hours. The key things about this dryer really is the loading time. You've got about 15 minutes to load it because it loads at 2 tonnes a minute. And unloads at 2 tonnes a minute. So you've got 15 minutes to load it, 15 minutes to unload it, and somewhere around 3/4 of an hour to an hour drying time and 3/4 of an hour each of cooling time. So just over 2 hours for a complete batch if you're taking 5% out. But as you said, the 25%, obviously you're taking a bit more out, but that's easier moisture to get out. It's the last couple of percent down from 17, which is the tougher stuff to get out.
You can't go away from a dryer and not worry about it. So we thought we'd alleviate the problem by allowing farmers to find out what's going on with their machine by text messages. So we come across this idea and call it Master Eye. It will monitor 3 functions of the dryer's progress, 2 of which are for failure. One would be a driveline failure, secondly would be a burner overheat situation, and the third and final trigger alarm would be for the drying is complete. What this will do, any one of these problems arises, or as I say, the drying is complete, it will then send a text message via the SMS system to the farmer's telephone. His phone, or maybe 4 more. It can be programmed to have 5 phones, and it will alarm 1 to 3 of these situations.
As I see it, you have 3 people involved. You have the farmer's store, you have the flour mill, and then you have the end consumer. So there is traceability right the way from the flour that's being used in the supermarket back to the farm and indeed the field where it's come from.
If you can grow wheat well, as it has been for the last few years, the best growers, achieving the best yields and the best margins will have a very secure future of growing wheat.